Welcome back to the Succeed with Dyslexia YouTube channel. In this series, we discuss news that goes on in the dyslexic community. So make sure you like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. In terms of latest news, we're going to cover a few different segments. In the first segment, dyslexia and literacy differences have been in focus at a high level. In segment number 2, we have an interview with Roger Broadbent from the Dyslexia Institute in the UK about Greater Manchester. And finally, in segment number 3, we head off into the art world to explore the creative side of dyslexia. New York mayoral candidate Eric Adams speaks out about disparities in the city's public education system with local news outlet Pix11. He details in his idea to take reform right to the heart of the city's Department of Education. Adams is calling for universal dyslexia screening in schools across the city. This is something he says he will waste no time in implementing if he were to be elected. Adams cited an unnamed report that features some sobering evidence, which suggests that 30% of the city's inmate population has dyslexia. It is thought that the early identification of reading problems can help reduce the school-to-prison pipeline, a system that could identify dyslexia earlier and help learners get the support they need could give Adams' idea an edge in the election. There's a wealth of evidence suggesting that poor literacy skills make the likelihood of an individual spending time in prison much higher. Adams' screening process aims to tackle this devastating trend from the start. He explains that schools in areas with large numbers of homeless households, high rates of crime, and low health and well-being need funding to address these issues too. In this next segment, we have a conversation between Hannah and Roger Broadbent, who is going to be speaking with us about his educational project.
Good morning, guys. I am Hannah from Succeed with Dyslexia, and today I'm exploring more about how one city in Northern England is putting excellent dyslexia support at the heart of a groundbreaking new scheme in education. I'm here with Roger Broadbent from the Dyslexia Institute UK to find out more.
Morning, Hannah.
Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, cool. So I'm the director of the Dyslexia Institute UK. I've been working around dyslexia for years and years and years in all sorts of different roles, supporting students at university, etc. And I'm involved in this really exciting project with the dyslexia-friendly movement here in Greater Manchester. It's a project in conjunction with Greater Manchester and lots of different organisations, primarily under the mayoral office of Andy Burnham, who really understands the issues around dyslexia. And he was the guest speaker at last year's conference. So he understands the ramifications of undiagnosed, unsupported dyslexia for our communities. So what we're trying to do here in Greater Manchester is, it's nothing groundbreaking, but it's what we're trying to do is put together a kind of blue sky system of operation for educators and councils, because this has got to be a team approach when we're addressing dyslexia. It's not just one magic wand's going to fix all the woes of mankind and womankind overnight. But what we're trying to do is to make sure that we're not repeatedly making the same mistakes here in Greater Manchester, and then hopefully, if that's successful, in other communities around the UK, that we're not constantly making the same mistakes where we're letting kids down in education and adults who are in education, so that they are falling through the cracks, they're falling through the net, and they are not fulfilling their true potential. And, you know, I'm sure, Hannah, that you've seen it with the effective work that scanning pens do, etc., that if the interventions arrive in a timely fashion, in a well-constructed manner, then the effect on the individual, the dyslexic person, can be profound, and they can really thrive in the educational world, and they can go on and have different life outcomes than they might otherwise have. And that's what we want to achieve. So in a nutshell, that was it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Can you tell me a little bit more about where the dyslexia-friendly education project started off? Like, whose brainchild was it? How long has it taken to come to fruition?
So I've been trying to work around making Manchester a centre of excellence for dyslexia for years and years. Manchester's a challenged city. We have we're going through lots of changes in the city. You know, we're a post-industrial city. Before we used to be a massive engineering community, manufacturing community. We're going through a lot of transition. It's still a thriving, metropolis, and we're booming, as in growth and what have you. But the jobs that are coming into the city now are different jobs that need a lot more skill and education, IT jobs, etc. So the kind of the generational transition that we are going through means that we need to support our dyslexic community far more effectively than we have been doing historically. So as a consequence of that, that was picked up on by something called the Violence Reduction Unit here in Greater Manchester, an initiative that's running across the country, that then brought together lots of key interested parties as to how we can better achieve a more successful outcome for our young people, but the community as a whole, so that we don't have so many people who are who end up truanting, who end up getting in trouble, but more fundamentally, who don't achieve their true potential. Dyslexics, well supported, full of self-esteem and self-confidence, can go on and achieve huge things, massive things for our community. It's not by accident that 40% of the millionaires in the UK are dyslexic. We are very creative, very resilient. We find solutions to problems. That's kind of how our brains are wired. We're made for this gig. So we need to encourage our dyslexic element of the community as much as possible so that they can find their feet and move on positively. So other parties that are involved, obviously, GM Education, GM Government, working closely with Manchester College, Andrew Hume. There's some fantastic individuals, Becca, who work tirelessly to try and achieve this goal. You said about timeline. It's been a long time in the brewing.
Yeah.
Hopefully the pot will be ready for delivery in the new academic year, moving into August, September. There's a lot to achieve between now and then. And even when we've put together our strategy, our formula for greater success in this area, it's still going to take a lot of effort, and it's still going to need a lot of people to switch on to the issues around dyslexia, because historically we've not been doing it here in Greater Manchester, we've not been doing it in Greater London, we've not been doing it in Greater Birmingham, we've not been doing it across the country. It's not without cause the reason that we have so many dyslexic pupils who truant, and that's across the country. The huge majority of kids that truant are dyslexic. Well, why is that? We need to ask ourselves, how can we make education more accessible and support these individuals far more effectively than we've been doing in the past?
Oh, that's marvellous. I believe that there is a control group of adults in your pilot scheme. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of this for older learners and people returning to education?
Yeah, we're in the early stages of the pilot, but what we wanted to try and do was to bring support, effective support, to these individuals that they'd not experienced in the past. The problem that we've had is that COVID has had a massive impact not only on those individuals, and it's been an added burden for dyslexic students to be having all their lessons on Zoom, for example, their support on Zoom. It's an unnatural format. So that's been problematic, because the extra workload that's been on their shoulders has been without that kind of personal support that they've been used to. So they found it difficult to engage for lots of reasons, but also the tutors, their lecturers, their study support workers they've also found it really tough that all this support's had to be booked in, timelined through Zoom, rather than being able to meet on a one-to-one on a regular basis and have that, that kind of continuality. And it's also tired a lot of people out. Yeah. I think there's kind of a feeling across the country. I don't know about you, Hannah, but it's kind of, we're all a bit zoomed out.
A little, yes.
Yeah. I know it's been effective in lots of ways. So for me, with regards to the conference that we're going to talk about in a short while, that's been a really effective development and evolution for me and what I want to achieve with the dyslexia conference. But I think for day-to-day learning experience, it's been really tough for students and those people who are trying to support and educate them.
Definitely. Can you tell me a little bit more about the people that you're trying to help and support? I mean, what does this mean in terms of the school to prison pipeline, and what does this mean for Manchester as a whole?
Good question. Well, at the minute, it's in its seedling stage, and it will mean nothing unless those people in governance who are in charge of the purse strings seriously can take it on board, can evaluate the long-term consequences of not implementing change for dyslexia support and education and general support in the community. Or we just carry on as we've been going for the last generations, where we are tolerating this almost systematic neglect of a significant portion of the population. We've got to remember that dyslexia affects 1 in 5 of the population. It's 20% of the population. And by dyslexia, I include dyscalculia and dyslexia. Dyscalculia is 5% of the population. By us ignoring the significant extra requirements that are needed at the pertinent times for these individuals, we are just brewing a really negative scenario for these people and therefore for our communities. I can't remember who said it, but there's somebody famous, I think it was Goethe or somebody, said that the strength of any society should be measured by its weakest link. I'm not saying that dyslexics are weak, but if we allow them to fail because we are not supporting and getting involved at the right time, it's the community's weakness, not the individual.
Absolutely, yes. You have a conference coming up with Dyslexia Institute UK, don't you?
Yeah, Anna, I know I get really up on my high horse about it, and I don't want to sound as though I'm preaching about it. And I'm sure you, like myself, and like lots of us, your colleague Jack and lots of other people who are working in this area, we all want to see significant change. It's not just the Dyslexia Institute UK, Dyslexia Scotland, the BDA. There are lots of organisations that are crying out for significant change in this subject area. Right, so going on to the International Virtual Dyslexia Conference, the 9th and 10th of September. It follows on from last year's really successful event, where Andy Burnham was the opening speaker. We had over 40 guest speakers from around the world. It's going to be a similar format, but we're making it a lot more accessible this year. Last year was pretty much on an app-based format. This year's going to be, it doesn't matter if you're on desktop, laptop, smartphone, doesn't matter what format you're going to be on. And the big thing about it is you can dip into it and watch what you want to see when you want to watch it. So you don't have to take those 2 days off to cram in all those different presentations. We've got world-leading experts who are going to be presenting on a range of subjects, such as the school gate to prison gate scenario. We've got issues like, what's it like being dyslexic and in a relationship? Why is it more difficult? Why is it more problematic for dyslexics in relationships? We've got things like, what's it like to live the experience of being a dyslexic person and having that prejudice, and also being black and having to deal with that prejudice in life. So we've got all sorts of speakers. We've got Neil Alexander Pass. We've got Professor Jonathan Glazard. We've got over 30 speakers already.
That's very exciting.
Students get a super discount price. I think it's £11.70. The early bird tickets have all flown out. They went, and we've now got the normal price tickets, but it's only 50 quid. But it's not a lot of money, and you get the CPD points, so that's your continual professional development points that these days professionals are obliged to accrue so many points per year, and it's going to be a really fun, interesting event. And we've got lots of marvelous, the latest up-to-date assistive tech and other service providers are going to be marketing their wares and their services at the conference. And delegates this time will be able to book in for one-to-one sessions with these providers. They can book in for learning webinars so that they can get to see up front, but have it explained to them by somebody, or they can just go on the recorded webinars. But I want to try and get across to the delegates that there's fantastic support kit and services available that will make a real difference to the lives of dyslexic individuals if we start to use it en masse.
No, that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for chatting to us today, Roger.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Hannah. All the best.
Have an amazing day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
New Delhi-based contemporary artist, Pallav Chander's latest online exhibition is an explosion of texture and color. Chander's work is like the work we might see from another great artist with dyslexia, the distinctive Pablo Picasso. He completed his Bachelor of Fine Arts degree at Birmingham City University in the UK and was awarded a junior fellowship by the Indian Ministry of Culture in 2019. Chander's expressionist paintings and mixed media pieces are a powerful representation of the intense emotions that neurodivergent people might experience when interacting with the world. You can take a look at some of Pallav Chander's other works at his page on Art Heritage, where you can experience his art in virtual reality from the comfort of your own home. Moving on to the feature portion of this video, I had the opportunity to have a conversation with Jaime Baker, who is an educational therapist and also the parent of a child who has dyslexia. And she'll be giving us some of her insights and advice to individuals who are directly or indirectly affected by dyslexia. Hi everyone, I am Jeff and I am here with Jaime, who is an educational therapist. And our conversation today is going to be on the topic of course, dyslexia. So Jaime, if I could just have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Jeff. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Jaime Baker, and I am a homeschooling mom first and foremost to my 4 kiddos. And I'm also an educational therapist under the National Institute for Learning Development.
Fantastic. Now, I understand you have a child who is dyslexic.
Yes.
And has that been a motive in you pursuing what you currently do, or were you already pursuing that beforehand?
That's a great question. So I do have a daughter with dyslexia, but that was not the first thing on my mind when taking any training through the National Institute for Learning Development Canada. In fact, my son, who is just turning 15, was really struggling with his learning. And so I, for years, muddled through the decision of whether to go back to school to help him. And while on that journey, we started to see symptoms of dyslexia in our youngest, our daughter. And lo and behold, this training was just fantastic to help her with her difficulties. So I'm super thankful for the fact that I got to receive the training in the first place.
So parents who have children who have dyslexia or other learning differences, what are some strategies that you are sharing with parents to aid and help them with their children who might have differences in their learning?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing to keep in mind really is that, there's been this myth over so many years that they can be lazy. And I think for a lot of parents, it's us coming to that realization that, they're not lazy. They truly would perform if they could. And so getting that off the plate right away to help parents know, if you're telling your child something and they're not auditorily picking it up, it's not because they're being lazy or trying to be defiant. A lot of these learners with differences have a hard time connecting the information because really they're not hearing it the way you think they hear it. So a lot of these kids, it's on a perceptual level. It's how the information gets taken in. So it really is a matter of getting a diagnosis, getting seen by a professional to sort through all of their learning struggles to see where is the breakdown occurring. Is it at the input level, or is it in the elaboration level where, their brain has to take that information, do something with it, and then eventually put it out. So I think before you can even talk about strategies, we really have to have a fundamental understanding of where these kids are coming from.
Because ultimately where they're coming from will be your catalyst, right, of how you help them in their educational journey.
Right. I have to say too, it's very important to remember too that for kids with dyslexia or any learning difference, it's not like a one-size-fits-all approach. Each of these kids are different and unique in their own way. So, my daughter has dyslexia, but, a friend of hers who has dyslexia might show different types of symptoms. So you can't necessarily say if they're not showing A, B, C, D exactly the way that we think in the textbook, that they have it or they don't. They all really display it differently.
And I think that's amazing with, individuals like yourself and stuff that are making these strides, because traditionally education has just been one like paintbrush stroke, just a very broad, try and cater to all. But the way education is going and the way it's turning is it's more of a tailored experience for the individual, which, I think is incredible. And that's ultimately where we're trying to go. But tell me more about brain changing intervention. That's a little bit new to me. So could you tell me a little bit about that?
Definitely. So this is where I'm super passionate, being able to change the brain, because we know that the brain has plasticity. It means that it can change from a state where it's not taking information in and it can't do the jobs that are being required of it to eventually being able to do that. And what we're doing is we're creating neurological pathways. And we do that by really recognizing that it's not so much the outcome of a task that we ask a child to do, but it's the process. So in the type of work that I do, I really work with the kids specifically on their area of struggle, but we use their strengths to work on those deficit areas. And what happens is the more we practice together, and it's a very tailored intervention. Like I said, every kid's different. So I can't just say, well, I'm going to use the same program for every single unique learner. We tailor it to meet their needs. And so as we do that, we rehearse the different areas very specifically. Then what happens is the brain is able to take slowly in that information and be able to work with it, understand through strategy works that they can do this. So this is something that I have seen really change lives. One of my students actually has decided that instead of college, she thought she could only do college. She's now decided that her brain has changed enough. She wants to go to university.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, all right. So now going over to the reader pen, I understand that you've had some breakthroughs with the reader pen with your own daughter. What has your experience been with that and the importance of the strategies and internet safety?
Yes, definitely. So my daughter has really struggled with the emotional level of learning. And the further on we went with her reading, the more I could see that her brain was shutting down because she was feeling like a failure from the get-go. So for her, if I said to her, just go pick a book off the shelf and just try, it was like, no way, Mom. I know I'm going to fail from the get-go. So with the reader pen, she has confidence. And I teach confidence in session, but it's a progression, right? It doesn't just happen overnight. And she'll be in therapy for years to just keep using the strategies. But with the reader pen, as we go on our journey, she has the opportunity to have those little bits of confidence infused as she picks it up And she knows if she's really struggling, she's got a helper with her right there. So if I'm doing dishes or I'm helping another student in her homeschooling, that confidence booster is what she needs to just physically go and pick up a book and try. So we do use strategies with it. I tell her the first thing we always have to do with the reader pen is we have to try the word before we scan it. I need her brain to make an attempt before, because so quickly we can just rely on the accommodation and not get the brain to change. And it needs that opportunity first. So first she'll try the word. She'll look for patterns, blends in a word, the beginning and the end of the word. She has to become a real detective. She learns about vowel teams. We even do something called morphology. Sounds like a big word, but what it means is that we're becoming detectives of words. Where do these words come from? What are they made up of? Is there meaning in these small parts of words? And if she still can't get it, then she'll scan the word. So she'll do that. And then as she gets better, I lengthen that list. So then it's like, before you scan it this time, I want you to go through the first 2 steps. And then I want you to try spelling it, because with dyslexia, often kids will start sometimes in the middle of the word. Sometimes they'll want to start reading it at the end of the word. So getting her brain to sequence the letters. And then eventually we go through more and more, and the strategies continue. So, I want her to guess too. What do you think the word could be? Because that's showing me emotionally that she's not so scared by the process. She's willing to actually try. And so she'll go through and then she'll scan it. And then it's a check method for her. It's like, okay, well, were you close? Were you able to get it? And if not, hey, let's not be afraid of mistakes. Mistakes teach us, right? So then it's obviously not just words, but we go into, I really want to touch on that idea of internet safety, because it really is becoming a huge problem for our society. In today's day and age, it's more crucial than ever that we're training our children in media safety. We have teachers reporting that cyberbullying is their number one concern in their classrooms. And 52% of parents are worried that their children will be bullied, So it's through texting, it's through social groups online. And one of the things that hit me the hardest was that because of the social isolation due to COVID, devices used during the pandemic, there's been an influx of sharing selfies that are not appropriate and very explicit messages between teens and other people. So, when we have the reader pen, it's so nice for a parent, because you want to talk about emotional. We get emotional when we feel like we're trying to educate our kids. We're trying to help them learn. But what's happening really is we're introducing them into a realm that their brains are physically not ready for sometimes to make wise decisions. So my reader pen, it's not connected to Wi-Fi. I feel good knowing that my daughter can use this brilliant technology, and I don't have to worry about cyberbullying, predators, phishing scams, all that. So it really is, it's nice for her, it's nice for me, it's a good fit.
All right, so the next question I have for you is about reading culture. And as a person working in education, what have you seen with reading culture?
So reading culture, I think, really starts in the home. And that's it can feel like a big pressure for parents, I think, because here their children are at school a lot of the day, even teens, right? How do you start a reading culture when they're already in high school? Yeah. But I think it's about making it simple, starting small. And when you think about culture, it's about, culture is about food and clothing and song and dance and rites of passage and daily routines. And it's very much the same thing when you talk about reading culture. It's something we need to experience every day. It's about socializing in it. And it's about having somebody with you who can teach you along the way how to enjoy reading, how to respect a book, how to even just think through what it is that you're reading. So culture can start at home, and this is something that's helpful for kids with ADHD, kids with sensory issues. But my big focus really is kids with dyslexia, because we want them to not be fearful of words and letters and reading. We want them to take it in and say, hey, I'm able to change my thinking and maybe my choices, and to be able to empathize with other people through the stories they read. So I think one of the things that I really recommend is to be positive. Parents at home, be positive. You need to say things like, I just read a really cool sentence. It doesn't mean you have to be a reader yourself reading, classic books. But I think so often kids can hear us say something like, oh, I was at work and I just had to read this, horrible, huge report. It was awful. Well, guess what they take in? I had to read and it was awful. They don't think about what kind of reading it was, And I think for them to, get them involved in getting out to the library. They don't have to pick out 25 books and read them all that night, but to just sit down and pick one at a time, Sometimes kids too, when they read, it's like my one son, he wants to read on his back, on his belly, upside down on a chair. Let them be comfortable where they want to read. And that's, I think, applicable for classrooms too. I don't think we have to be sitting at our desk and book in hand. I think it's really good to take into consideration the unique characteristics of each child. And it has to be natural. We don't want to be forcing books into kids' hands when it's their most tired time of the day.
Yeah.
And one thing that I tell parents and even educators is be real. You want to pick up books that you're interested in and model it to the kids because they're watching. And you know how it is. You've learned probably yourself, right, Jeff, from somebody who's been passionate about what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying fake it, but if you're going to read in front of your kids, you want to pick up books that you're actually interested in. And it can't, you don't have to be just in a thick textbook, or even if it's a information letter, or a pamphlet. They're seeing you physically reading.
Yeah.
And I think that goes to show too that, we've got to get off the phones. Because often our kids, we think, hey, I'm an adult, I'm reading. But what they see is more screen time.
Yeah. And I think also in conjunction with the phones, I mean, you might very well be reading, right? But also on that phone is the endless limit of distractions. When you're reading a book, it's tangible, right? It's that's all that's there. But when you're reading something digitally, that's, the phone is tangible, but all the information is, is not tangible, and all of a sudden you might get a notification on Instagram or Snapchat, whatever. So I think I totally agree. Like, I know when I've tried to read on my phone, I don't think I've ever made it through a few paragraphs or anything without my phone buzzing or something to distract me and pull me out of that world that I was reading, right?
Exactly. And I think it's good for us to realize too that our brains actually are less stressed when we're reading from paper. There's some studies that have been done where they're showing that there are higher levels of stress and tiredness when tasks are taken on a computer. And so if our kids and teens, or even if you're a grown-up and you're struggling with reading, try to remember that, your brain's already struggling. It's already having a hard time. Don't give it more to have to fight through. Pick up a book, something with paper.
I think support isn't just a nice supplement, right? I think it's more of a necessity. Would you agree?
Totally agree. Yes. And we need to be supportive of our struggling learners, because really we can't be relying on teachers all the time. I mean, they're so tapped right now too. I mean, can you imagine having a classroom with 30 kids and you've got struggling learners in there and they're all trying the best they can? So it's really important with support that even those who are trying to support, if they themselves need support, if you're a parent who is struggling to read yourself, it's really good to surround yourself with people who can support you. So I always say, local libraries, they're fantastic. They're willing and they're helpful, and they want to help people learn to read. So finding strategies from other therapists or local educators who, are passionate about this area. And I think being part of a group where you're experiencing similar difficulties with other people, because you yourself can struggle to have a struggling reader. So if you have a neighbor, I know some elderly people in our neighborhood who love the kids, if they'd be willing to sit down and read with them, just to get them hearing the language and give you a break, right? Then that's another option. But definitely support is essential.
Fantastic. All right. Well, that brings us to the end. Thank you again. Before I wrap things up, is there anything you want to end on or touch base on before we close?
I encourage you to check out NILD. There's one in the States, National Institute for Learning Development, and NILD Canada. It is nildcanada.org.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jaime. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with me. I think the information you have given is worth its weight in gold for people who are searching for this type of support, this information. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff. It was a pleasure.
This is the inspirational spotlight portion of this video. In this segment, I'd like to introduce you to Julia and Shaheim, and they will be talking about Shaheim's experience and his resilience in achieving academic success.
So Shaheim, you're from, like me, you're from London. I'm from West London. I think you're the other side of the river, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm South London, Southwest. Yeah.
Southwest.
Grew up in Wandsworth. So hey viewers, my name is Shaheim Ogbomo-Harmitt. I am currently a student at King's College London on the Medical Research Council Doctoral Training Programme. Like Julia said, I was born and raised in London. I went to a non-selected state school where for secondary and also my sixth form, they were the same school. And I was diagnosed with dyslexia from a very young age, like I think as long as I can remember. And I've pretty much always struggled with it. And I think that's really going to be the nature of the conversation today. I also like the title Resilience. I think anyone who is dyslexic, resilience is a big part. Being resilient is a big part of their life. I think for me especially, that was the case from, just my studies in general, all the way up into, sorry, the police car, up into like being resilient in academics and also even trying to hit my certain goals. I remember that being dyslexic, it helped, teachers and people thought I couldn't achieve a lot of things. So I had to be resilient within myself to make sure I can reach my full potential. That was a roundabout way to answer your question, Julia, but that's the information you wanted.
Absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. So we've got something in common. We both have difficulty with dyslexia, and you said that you had your diagnosis quite early. So I think the earliest you can get a diagnosis for dyslexia is age 7. So it sounds as though someone at home must have recognised that there was something happening. So who was responsible?
I think it must have been one of my teachers. I actually struggled with language very young. I actually had a speech impediment, and a lot of speech therapy throughout primary school. And then because of that, they looked at other forms of learning difficulties, and one of them was also dyslexia. During those times, I wasn't really aware. I knew that I was behind. I literally, everyone will learn in one room, while me in this, SEN teacher will go to another room with just me and her. And, it felt like there's something different about myself. I obviously didn't know the correct terms, but I knew what I was struggling with, and I knew that it wasn't normal. And then I got a formal diagnosis where I was aware of it, I would say, around about GCSE. So from primary school, going to my secondary school. And it was quite a bad school, and a lot of kids had learning difficulties. And they didn't necessarily have the resources to provide for everyone, except for the people who needed the most. So I was kind of left in the middle of the road, basically. didn't want to give me any support. I was within like the mainstream kind of teaching, and it was a constant struggle.
So it's so tricky, and usually once you've got an identified learning difference, so in your case dyslexia and some other things going on as well that made it tricky for you with speech and language, but you assume that accommodations are going to be made and support's going to be given and help to get through the GCSEs is going to be there. And so I'm really surprised that, maybe extra time wasn't there for you, or any other sort of support. So nothing there for you for your GCSEs.
Yeah, well, I had extra time and a laptop, but I would say the laptop didn't really help me because I could write faster. But it was more like extra time, like, I just have more time in the exam, and it's like, fine, good suppose. And then I think the way I went around it and managed to be successful was sitting down on myself and being like, okay, what can you do? And I started developing strategies. So this is like when I really thought about, okay, what exactly am I struggling with? And I realized this concentration at reading text. So when I read something, my mind just goes absent sometimes, but I don't realize it. And it obviously slows me down and hinders me. So I was like, okay, I need to work on my concentration. So I need to do this concentration exercise.
What are the technologies that you use and feel support you the most to be as productive and effective as you can be while you're studying?
I think the biggest one is the shift from having stuff on paper to a screen and being able to take notes on that. Large part of my condition is that stuff on white text seems to be an issue for me in terms of concentration. And I remember like exams being difficult in that way. But ever since, iPads and ebooks and all those stuff come along, you can like change the brightness and the color, and that just dramatically increased my productivity and my effectiveness when learning. So that's the first one. And then this is something I've been doing recently from suggestions from a few of my mates. It's this, I think it's like speech to text diction kind of feature where you can speak into your laptop and it will just type it out, right? The technology's been out for ages, but I haven't really utilized it till now when I had to write these essays for my, these reports for my master's. I literally now what I do is I basically just talk to myself for 30 minutes and then I was okay, let me go back and make this make sense. Like let's correct the grammar, let's fix the words. And that's really helped me out.
I think there is a success formula for people with dyslexia. I think this can't word, as a teacher who's had that similar experience, I used to say, success comes in cans, not can'ts. And my teacher like, how can it come in a can, miss? It does. It comes in a can. It starts with I can. So that's that. I was known for that. Was the can lady. But I think there is a formula for success if you are dyslexic, and I'm going to tell you what I think the formula is. And resilience is on that list. So I would say early recognition for your dyslexia is important. Having recognition that there is actually a difficulty there that can be supported. Really important. Then the good support. You had this, Shaheim, you had the good support of some teachers at that early primary phase who were able to support you. The next thing is personal determination. You have absolutely exemplified how you do that through this conversation today. Resilience, absolutely. You've got to be able to take the knocks and get back up again. Good.
Sorry, I want to interrupt you, sorry, because I feel like I want to say something tangible, but I feel like I haven't saying anything tangible. And I think, like anything in life, it is about self-determination, right? And like, what worked for me might not work for someone else. But I think if I just say what it is for me, maybe you can see the general pattern and apply it to yourself. Like, where I'm come from, the people I have around me, success is nowhere means like guaranteed, and like you rarely see it. And it's sad and it gets you down. And I always wanted to not only be different, but to change that. I think for me, being successful isn't necessarily having personal success within my career, but helping everyone around me and my community, and kind of seeing just like depravity or like stuff which is not nice. It's going to make you motivated. So I think if you have something you want to change, something you want to fight for, translate that into a goal you can achieve for yourself. That is the easiest way to get self-determined. And I hope that is something tangible which you can take from this live stream or live.
Without a doubt. I think that you've just absolutely encapsulated that really crucial point.
Yeah.
And clearly you have grown up in a part of London, which I know, and a lot of us living in places and situations where it is really tough to get the breaks and the support that you need to be the best person you can be.
Yeah. And that's why I want to focus the last half of my career towards that. I think what I've also realized is that you have to achieve something to change something in a way. Because if you just say, oh, let's stop doing this and let's do this, like, why should I listen to you? I mean, it's like, oh, there's actually not a reason till you achieve something which people see as valuable or something commendable. And that's kind of my aim right now, is to be an innovator within my field so that I can use that influence to change the situation as it is. And also, there's also amazing organizations out there already and individuals doing that. So I'm also fairly confident that the years will be better and things will change.
That brings us to the end of this episode. If you found this informative, please consider liking this video, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Once again, we'd like to thank Scanning Pens for sponsoring this episode. And as always, thank you so much for watching.